Thank you so much. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carol Long. I'm the director of the Personnel Commission. Um, so I recognize that the past 2 years have been tremendously chaotic for everyone. All of us have experienced massive changes happening in both our work lives and our home lives, and that we've had to change to remote operations literally overnight with no expert around who's been this before to tell us the right way to do this. And thankfully now we're moving back to more in-person services at a little bit more realistic pace. And I think this is giving us the opportunity again to take some time to focus the attention back on our own professional development and desires for upward mobility. So I think the timing of this is just perfect. If there's anything positive to say about the past 2 years, we've actually seen on our end a pretty large increase in the rate of promotions over outside hires. I know back in 2019-20, we filled 74 classified vacancies, and only 20% of these were filled through internal promotions. The remaining 80% were filled from people outside of SMC. And 2021, much different year, much more closer eye on spending. We filled only 20 classified vacancies, but 70% of those vacancies were filled through internal promotions. And now in 21-22, we've got a little bit of a mix. Hiring is picking up significantly as we approach the spring semester. We've already more than doubled the number of hires from last year. And right now we're sitting right about at 40% of those hires are being done through internal promotions. So, and it seems, I think that number is going to keep going up. Classification studies, we're engaged in ongoing classification studies in our department. This has been going on for the past several years. One of the outcomes I'm seeing from these studies is it does seem to be creating more promotional opportunities, at least in some areas, meaning that it's creating more levels of jobs. So for example, in student services, prior to the start of our studies, we had 21 classifications, but they were distributed only among 5 salary ranges. So you come in at an entry level and there's 4 opportunities maybe you could promote up to from there. And now we have 26 classifications, not that many more, but we have them distributed among 10 different classifications. And so I know that's more opportunities, but also prior to the studies, senior student service specialist at range 22 was one of the highest paid in that group. And now we have 6 salary ranges that are above range 32. And so some of the areas it is moving in a positive direction. I think on the negative end, we definitely have more technology challenges when people are applying and competing for promotions. Our interviews and written tests are now being administered remotely. For those of you in jobs where using computers, using technology is an everyday part of what you do, this may not be any big deal at all, but for others, it may have more of an impact. And we've also seen candidates running into challenges with finding consistent Wi-Fi. And so that's another thing that is just a negative that we don't have a lot of control over right now. So we want to talk today about how we can help you address some of these challenges. We also want to talk about our processes because we recognize that our processes can be fairly complex, and we don't want the complexity of the processes to impact your performance on an interview or any kind of testing. And finally, we want to address how to maximize your knowledge and skills to prepare you for promotion, and also how to improve your performance in an interview. Before I turn this over to Olga, I just wanted to touch on there may be, because we're doing this presentation for kind of all classified staff, not everything we discuss is going to be applicable to everyone. If we miss anything, please feel free to ask questions on that. And again, we'll kind of be monitoring the chat and we'll try to address pretty much everything that we can. So I'm going to turn this over to Olga Vasquez. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. So with that, if you had registered before, you should have received a handout that goes along with this presentation. Otherwise, Carla is going to drop it in the chat. And so I really want us to take this moment and think about your career goal. Take some time to, where do you see yourself in a year and 5 years from now? Where do you want to go? I know that when I first started at SMC 12 years ago, my goal was to find an organization that was transparent and that there were opportunities for upward mobility. But that could be different for everybody. So make sure that your goal is specific, it's relevant and attainable. This is going to help us to put a path together to help us achieve that goal. On your handout, it also asks you to list your current classification. This is very important because there are many times that employees are unaware of their classification title as well as their classification range. I'm going to go on our website, and this link is also on the handout, and you will be able to see all of the different classifications as well as the job discipline and the salary range. So sometimes when you are in a specific classification, you can, by looking at this sheet, you can see what is the upward mobility path available to you within this job discipline, or maybe other opportunities within your same salary range in another job discipline, or just all the different jobs. So again, it's really important that you know your classification as well as your range. Many times we find individuals apply for transfers or promotions, and they're ineligible for these opportunities because their classification range maybe does not allow them for, to apply for a promotion or a transfer. In that sense, they should have applied for a different type of employment opportunity. Are there any questions so far on this, on your classification title or your range or where to find it? No. Okay. So I'm going to go on to the next one. Okay, so now that we know where we're starting from and where we want to go, we need to know what are the different opportunities available for us to promote within Santa Monica College. So I'm going to go on our website, which is smc.edu/classified jobs. And on our main page, you're going to see all of the different opportunities that are available to both internal and external candidates. I'm going to click right now on Reach and Recruitment. And you'll notice that in the top, we have it listed. It's a promotional and open recruitment, which is going to result in 2 eligibility lists. So what that means is that if you're an internal employee, this is and you want to apply to be promoted to an outreach recruitment specialist, which is a range 34, and you're in a lower classification range, or maybe something completely different, you can apply for this recruitment. You'll go through the testing process, and at the end, we will have 2 eligibility lists, one for internal candidates, promotional, and then another list that's separate for external candidates. And so when it comes to final interviews, the promotional list, the internal candidates are going to be forwarded to the hiring manager first, and then they go to the external candidates. So there is some benefit to applying for a promotional and open recruitment. And this is where you will find it. If you go on your top left, there's a menu icon. We're going to go on to promotional and opportunities only. So on this screen is where we list recruitments that are only available to permanent employees of Santa Monica College that have completed their probationary period. As you can see, we have 2 openings at this time. For example, the accounting manager classification is listed here. So if anyone is interested in applying for the accounting manager, this is where you would go. There's also a list of questions, and all of our recruitments will always have a list of questions that will help us distinguish, whether you are an internal employee or an outside, as well as questions that are pertinent to the job and part of the recruitment process at times. So here is this information. And then on the menu icon, you can go back on the left corner, and we're going to click on internal transfer opportunities. So for internal transfer opportunities, this is actually where we tend to see a lot of, the more of like issues that come across. We have a lot of employees that apply for transfer opportunities that are maybe in a lower classification and they want to transfer. So again, if you're in a lower classification than the transfer position, you have to apply for a promotional or open recruitment. So we're going to take a look at the the disabled student service assistant, for example. Oh, actually, it was a county technician. And we're going to go over the different transfer opportunities that are available. So again, it'll list where this classification, it's an accounting technician, and this classification is for auxiliary service. It also lists that it's a range 34 right here. Okay. So if you go under questions, we have a position transfer, and it's also on your sheet, so feel free to take notes. So a position transfer is for someone who is currently in the same classification as a vacant position. So for example, if there's an accounting technician over in fiscal services, they are eligible to apply for the accounting technician over in auxiliary, because it's literally, you're just changing departments. You're not changing positions. Then you have,
Olga,
yes.
I'm sorry, there was a question in the chat. What goes into the decision making on whether a position is promotional or open competitive?
Oh, okay, that's a really good question. Do you mind if I address it after we go over the transfers? Okay. All right, thank you. And then we go over lateral transfers. So lateral is a similar or related classification with the same salary range as a vacant position. So again, the accounting technician is a range 34. Another classification in 34 is the budget technician. So the budget technician, since it's in the same salary range, 34, they could apply to be an accounting technician over in auxiliary services. That would be a valid transfer. And lastly, we have a voluntary demotion. So this is when you're in a higher or related classification and you want to voluntarily demote. So for example, an accountant, that's a range 41. Let's say they want to be an accounting technician over an auxiliary. That would be a valid transfer. In my case, for example, when I first started at Santa Monica College, I was a payroll specialist at range 32. I took a voluntary demotion to an administrative clerk, range 20, in the human resources department, because at that time, my goal was to work and grow within the human resources field. So taking a voluntary demotion allowed me the opportunity to get my feet into the desired department that I wanted to go into, and allowed opportunities for me to grow and learn more about the human resources field and advance in my career. So this is why someone may consider a voluntary demotion. It all really depends on your goals and where do you want to go and the steps that you're willing to take to get there. Okay. And I know someone had a question about what goes into a promotional and open recruitment.
Yeah, there's the question in the chat, and there's also a raised hand.
Okay, great. So in terms of deciding what the recruitment type, we meet with the hiring managers, and we discuss all the different options. If, for example, there are enough candidates, internal candidates, that we think this would be a good opportunity for promotion, then that's when we highly encourage a promotional opportunity, so that internal employees have an opportunity to advance. And we also believe that there to be a sufficient applicant pool. If we don't have any idea of interested employees or where employees may come from internally, then that's when we consider opening the recruitment to the outside world, so that we can have a large candidate pool and see what's out there. And then other times when we're not that sure, we may have individuals, we may not, that's when we may decide, you know what, let's run a both promotional and open recruitment. That way, if we have interested candidates, because again, we don't know all of the different skills that you have brought to SMC. You've had prior work experience, and no one really knows, I think every single employee truly. So that's when we open it for promotion open, just to see, if there's any interested candidates currently working at the college. So thank you. I hope that answered your question. And then, so let me just finish up the chart. There was also a career laddering, or also known as a working out of class opportunity. Sometimes the working out of class will be listed under promotional opportunities, and that's typically when departments don't not have any particular employee in mind, or maybe their department tends to be really small that they don't have anyone that they can give this opportunity to, which is when we would list it under the promotional recruitment. Other times, departments could be large, so they have maybe particular employees that they would want to give this opportunity, which is they're working at a class. It's a 90-day temporary assignment that allows employees to work in a different classification, typically higher, that allows them to gain those experience and knowledge in that job. I would encourage you that if you are interested in a certain, in a department or in a certain position, you communicate that to your manager or the hiring manager that oversees that position, so that if any time they have a vacancy or a need for a temporary assignment, they would have you on the forefront. Because again, if you don't express what you want to do or where you want to go to the appropriate parties, they're not going to have an idea that there's actually interested candidates.
And then Olga, are you okay if I call on the person that has her hand raised?
Yes.
Okay, Samuel, if you can unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, Olga, what's the difference between this salary range and job classification? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
So the salary range is aligned with the classification. So for example, if you're an outreach and recruitment specialist and you're a range 34, so that goes in line with what your salary will be within that range. There's 5 steps, but let's say you're a range 34, then you can apply for transfers that are lower than a 34 or within the same range as a 34. Or even lower, you'll be voluntary demotion. Any opportunity that's a range 34 or high, 35 or higher, you would have to apply for a promotional or open recruitment. So it's very critical that as employees, the range that your classification is on. Again, because we go based on the range, not your current salary.
Oh, okay. I think
Which-
that's what my problem is.
Yes,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
typically what we tend to find. Employees use their salary
Yeah.
as a way to apply for transfers, but again, it's all based on the range.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, so at this time, I'm going to pass it over to Karen Monzon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Olga. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so now we're going to talk about completing our application. So this screen is titled Dream Big and Let's Make It Happen. So what we're going to do is, well, first of all, I do have to admit that completing an application can be a tedious task. There are several parts to the job application that need to be completed or updated, such as your address, your phone number, education, and experience, as well as the supplemental questions. And those supplemental questions can be time consuming and do require a lot of thought. But I do want to bring your attention to the job recruitment that we currently have that Olga was just speaking about, the outreach and recruitment specialist. So let's look a little further at this recruitment. You'll see here listed above is the salary. It's also a full-time permanent position. And you also need to note the closing date. So anyone that's still interested in applying for this one, it does close tomorrow at 11:59 p.m. So one thing that we do want you to take a look at is what the ideal candidate looks like. And so it says right here on the job announcement, what you will bring to the college. And it does expressly indicate what sort of the ideal person looks like. So this person would possess experience delivering presentations, coordinating outreach activities in advance, be knowledgeable of district student programs, policies, practices, and systems. Other things that this ideal candidate would come to for this job would be comfort with technology, ability to adapt, establish rapport with students and stakeholders, take initiative, be a self-starter. So these are some of the criteria that the hiring manager is looking for an ideal candidate in this position. So if you feel like this describes you, we certainly encourage you to apply for this position. The other thing that you should look at, of course, is some of our just standard information is listed here, such as the benefits, salary placement. But what I really want to bring your attention to here is the example of duties. So what does an outreach and recruitment specialist do? So basically the list of the duties are listed here in order of importance. So you know, I'm not going to read them out for you, but I want you to take a look. And as well, you can also look on the job at the actual job description to see what the specific duties are for this position. And then also really important to note are the minimum qualifications. Now, minimum qualifications are important to know because this is what we, the staff of the Personnel Commission, are using to evaluate your application to see if you actually qualify for the position. So here it's listed as an associate's degree or equivalent in communications, business, public relations, or a closely related field. Also, a bachelor's degree is desirable. So it's not required, but desirable. The experience requirement is 2 years of experience with student services programs, which includes extensive public involvement and participation in promotion and coordination of program activities. And one more thing is the experience in education equivalency. So basically what this means is we can take education and or experience to qualify you if you don't have exactly meet those entrance requirements. For example, if you do not possess the 2 years of work experience with student services programs, but you have a bachelor's degree in this related area, then we can qualify your application, okay? And then that's just an example. And again, Carol did mention that, you know, this is not gonna be relevant to every person's classification, but this is just a good example that we wanted to show you. Also, take a good look at the questions. The supplemental questionnaire is really important because we use this to further evaluate your application, sometimes for something that we call a training and experience evaluation, okay? So this first question is just about the vaccine mandate, so you do need to answer it. But the second question talks about what the supplemental questionnaire is supposed to do. So it does say, you know, you are required to answer each question truthfully and completely. Also, this questionnaire will be used to determine if you meet the minimum qualifications. Also, they will be used to further evaluate your qualifications beyond the minimum requirements. Now, why do we do this? Sometimes we get, for positions such as student services, we get hundreds of applications. And realistically and logistically, we cannot bring forward every single person. So sometimes we do have to limit the application pool. And one of the ways that we do that is through the training and experience evaluation. And so and this is why it's so important to make sure that you completely and accurately answer the questions that will follow. And again, it's listed here, only the highest scoring candidates will move forward to the next step. Okay, so listed here below are some of the questions. And really important to note also is we do ask for certain things that you need to attach. So in this particular instance, we're asking candidates to attach transcripts and or degree. Okay. Also, again, we're asking just some of these questions are just, you know, answering how many years of experience, but then we're asking for more specific information. And this is where it's important to take some time to respond to these questions, okay? I'm going to bring you to, I'm going to have you take a look at a sample application. Oops. And I'm going to expand on the screen. So this is somebody's actual application, okay? But this is not an internal person. I just want you to know that this application does not belong to anybody that works at SMC, and all identifying information has been removed. So for this purposes, this person is Jane Doe. And this person did apply for this position. This is a true application, like I said, but I removed all identifying info. But this person does have a master's degree in education. They also listed their additional education as well as work experience. So this person has worked as an academic advisor from June 2015 to present. So this person has worked in a student services program for 2 or more years. And so this person would qualify. Also listed here are some additional related job experiences, as well as they've attached their transcripts, which was what we asked for. They also took some additional time to thoroughly answer some of these questions. So just for question number 5, for example, promoting student programs, this person listed how they did that and gave some specific information. Okay, so one of the more important things that we want to want you to take away is that we need you to treat this application as important as the job that you are applying for by thoroughly reading the job description and having a clear understanding of what the job duties are asking, and knowing what the highly qualified candidate looks like. Okay. And then here's an example of a not so qualified application. Again, this is a true application. I did remove all of their identifying information. So this is John Doe. So John Doe does have a bachelor's degree. But one thing I did want to bring to your attention is, when we're evaluating the applications, it's important that you clearly list out what your job title is. This person listed co-teacher. So what is a co-teacher? Any acronyms that you have, or like EOPS, for example, it's very helpful if you actually write out what those acronyms mean, and then you can put them in parentheses. And also, this person is, again, a teacher, so not necessarily related to promoting student programs. They've also listed that they were a substitute teacher, a youth specialist, a basketball coach. So this isn't this isn't an application that we would necessarily see as one of the more highly qualified. Now, that's not to say they're not qualified, but we'd have to take a further look. And so whatever you can do as a candidate to help promote your application by specifically indicating what your work experience is, that's so much more helpful. And then also here, the attachment is a resume. They didn't include their copy of their transcripts, which is what we asked for. Also listed here in the supplemental questions, it looks to us, and because I've reviewed thousands upon thousands of applications, I can tell when someone's copied and pasted off of their resume. So, this is really not answering it in a complete sentence, like a paragraph. This is just really copying and pasting to answer the question. And also what they did, which is a big no-no, is same as above. So they didn't take the time to answer the question, or they hit NA, and again, copying the resume. So again, if you want to make sure that your application meets the criteria and that you're fully evaluated and properly evaluated, it's super important that you do take the time to show that you care about this job and that you're taking it seriously and respecting the process. I know it's a lot of work. It does take a lot of time. So whenever you do see those job bulletins coming out and you see something that you're interested in, put it in your calendar, note the deadline date, take some time to answer those questions, okay? Okay, so now that you've submitted your application, you need to know what the selection process looks like. And we're going to watch this really short clip, and I want to see if you can identify what the selection process is in this particular clip, okay?
Thank you. So I've got the job. No, of course not. I don't employ gullible fools. That was the test, Greg, and you failed. Oh, all right then.
Greg, that's the nonchalant attitude we've been looking for.
You passed the test. Have I really? No, that was the test. You questioned me. No one questions me.
Now, if you wouldn't mind. Greg, you've passed the walking away test.
Okay, so that's obviously an exaggerated example, but has anybody had any kind of experience where you walk into an interview and you don't exactly know what that test or a testing process, and you don't exactly know what the selection process looks like? So one of the benefits of applying and working for the public sector is that all of the information related to testing is transparent and public information. So again, going back to this recruitment outreach and recruitment specialist, the selection process is listed here, and it does talk about what it looks like. Okay, and so again, just going back to what our selection process looks like, it can be anything from an application screening, a written exam, a training and experience evaluation, a performance exam, a technical project, or a qualifications appraisal interview, which is what we call a QAI. And just know that when you're applying for employment at SMC, you are entering into a testing process. So if you can take it as such, that when you're submitting your application, you're actually putting your hat in to start a testing process, that may make it easier for you to, maybe just take it to that extent where, hey, if I pass this first test part, well, then what's the next test part? What's the next test part? So you get to that final place, which is on the eligibility list. And if you have any questions ever during the recruitment, any of the recruitment phases, feel free to contact the Personnel Commission. We're always here to assist you, and we always welcome your questions. Okay, so does anyone have any questions before I pass it back over to Olga? Okay, so I'm gonna.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm going to jump in real quickly. There's one question that came up about working out of class assignments that I just wanted to address, because I know I've gotten this question before. And someone was asking about if you have if you have an opportunity for a working out of class opportunity and your supervisor won't let you take that opportunity, what do you do? Are they required to allow you to take that? And unfortunately, our rules are a little bit vague in that area, but that doesn't mean that you just let it go if that situation happens. I would strongly encourage you, if you're in that situation, to contact us, let us get involved, see if there's something we can do to assist. Because a lot of times with the supervisors, it's just a misunderstanding of what the situation is involved. You're not going away forever. You're just helping for a temporary amount of time.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and give this back to Olga.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Okay, great. All right, so now that we've submitted our application, one of our steps is our testing process is the qualification appraisal interview, as well as a final interview. So we're going to look at some videos, and then I'm going to ask for your feedback.
I got a lot to offer.
Tell us about your management experience.
I've got tons of it. Years, I can't even count them all. I mean, well, I've done it all. You'd be amazed. I got a lot to offer. You wouldn't believe it. I just want to also say that I took some medicine this morning. So I'm kind of out of it. The traffic killed me. I'm sure I do have some weaknesses. That's a tough question. I got to think about that one. Good night. I guess I'd have to say I can be predicted or perceived as rude at times because I'm so direct. And I personally don't think that's a weakness. I think it's a strength. At least people know where they stand with me.
Tell us what you know about WSSC's core values and strategies.
About what?
WSSC's core values and strategies. Do you know anything about them?
I don't have a clue.
Okay.
I never heard of a core value.
Okay.
Mr. Berry, what did you do to prepare for this interview?
You're not gonna believe this, but not a thing, not a darn thing.
Well, our final question is, what questions do you have for us?
This grade thing that you all have in this company is grades. Is that like the levels of whatever? What grade is this job?
This job is grade 16.
What,
And yes,
what does that mean?
It's levels.
What does that mean? Is that the
in
dollar?
terms of
Was like
what?
money or?
Yeah, there are ranges for each grade. Salary ranges for each grade, a minimum and a maximum.
I mean, I think that's kind of low for this job.
Do you know what the job is?
I forgot, but I think it's very low.
Okay, so this is none of our candidates, none of our employees, hopefully will do this, but who can share some of the things that you noticed in this interview?
Tell us about.
Oh, sorry.
I'll share, Olga.
Yes, Olenka.
So yeah, so he just visually, he wasn't dressed professionally. He didn't prepare for his interview. And then he didn't specifically say what his management background was. He didn't prepare and he didn't have any specific examples highlighting his strengths. and he kept focusing on his weaknesses, and he was just an awful candidate.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for pointing that out. He didn't, the first question was, what are your management skills? And this individual was not able to communicate any specific examples. And this is very critical for all of us. Remember, during an interview, you are being evaluated in the information that you communicate to the evaluators, to the raters. If you are unable to communicate details, duties that you've performed, any of your experience, the raters have no way in gauging you. Even though they may have your application, they're not here to assume that you have performed all the duties that are stated. Because sometimes, people copy and paste, things like that. So you're only being evaluated, like I said, on whatever you communicate to the raters. So this is not, make sure you don't use acronyms, because they may not know what that means. If you have a title, let them know. You need to share with them what it is that you do and what department you work for, what experience you have. Also, this candidate in our video, he joked around a little bit. He was very comfortable or maybe nervous. And sometimes that tends to happen. But again, some of the conversations he was having, you should probably have with your friends, not with your interview panel, because you still need to be professional as best as you can. Also dress appropriately. So even though we're on Zoom at the moment, make sure that you are dressed and well-groomed and dressed to be interviewed. Make sure you have a quiet area. I prefer that you're in a desktop, because sometimes we share information with you. And also, we've seen candidates do Zoom interviews from their cars or while they're driving, and it happens. So please take the time. Like Karen said, this is a serious process. So take the time, go into an office. If you don't have the adequate equipment for an interview, let us know, contact the Personnel Commission, and we can accommodate you. We have computers here at our office, and we can set you up in that way. So let's look at another interview.
This person.
Tell me about yourself.
Well, I have 6.5 years of medical sales experience covering a very large territory to bring to this position. So I'm self-motivated and I can work alone. During that time, I had valuable opportunity to interact with doctors and other medical professionals, whether it was through new product demonstration or in-service training, or sometimes I would just drop in, so it was more of a cold call situation. So I'm hardworking and I'm reliable, and I think this really makes me a great asset for your company. My personality is easygoing, so I get along with most people, and my ability to laugh at myself puts people at ease in tense situations. I have great communication skills, and I'm very comfortable with public speaking, and I can present complex information in real easy to understand ways. So I think with all of that combined, I really have a lot to offer your company.
Okay, so this interview was much different than our previous one. She was dressed, she provided examples, she was calm, nervous, and not nervous like our first candidate. I also want to share with you a training material that we put together in our office. Then you can take a look at it at any time, and it's tips for structured interviews. Okay, so we've listed some information that would help you to better prepare for your interview process, read the bulletin, how to prepare and be ready. We even have some sample responses, and some that are good and some that are maybe bad. We also provided you with a space for you to write out your answer, so that you can be prepared. A way to do this is look at the job bulletin, go through the duties, and see if you have any transferable skills or any direct skills or experience, and think about a response that you could provide if a certain question was asked that is related to a job duty. Same thing. And again, we even provide you with some sample interview questions here, and practice.
Ladies, there is a question in the chat. It states, is there a limit to how far down in the range one can go to keep the current salary?
I don't believe there is. You're frozen at your range. You
And
just
you're-
don't get, go ahead. Carol.
Talking about a voluntary demotion, I'm guessing, if you take a voluntary demotion, yeah, you just stay frozen at your range until, and you stay frozen until the natural step progression would move you up beyond where you're at right now. So if you voluntarily demoted to something one range below, you'll be frozen for a short bit of time, but then after a couple of step advancements, you'll start moving up, versus if you voluntarily demote to something way down below, you may just stay frozen at that level forever and ever.
Okay, I hope that answers the question.
So again, be professional, make sure your appearance is good, communicate to the raters your skills and abilities related to the job that you are applying for, and make sure that you have a conducive environment. Okay, so I'll pass it on to Carol. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. So before I touch on the content of this slide, I did want to just acknowledge that depending on the area where you work and also the level where you're at, some of you may have more upward mobility challenges than others. And some of this may be, to some extent, at least outside of your control. But I kind of want to touch on that because there are some things that you can do in a lot of situations. So for example, the size and type of department that you're in. If you're in a department has maybe a student service clerk, a program specialist, and then everybody from there on is academic, you're not going to have the same promotional opportunities in that department that you have if you're in a larger student services department where there's this many student service clerks, this many student service assistants, this many specialists, and so on. So that's one thing that is outside of your control, but this also can be, initially outside of your control, but you can also, if it's something where upward mobility is what you're looking at, you can keep your eye out for transfer opportunities to other departments where there may be more upward mobility opportunities. We've got situations where first level management or supervisory positions are within one department versus sometimes they're outside of that department, and the first level supervisor is overseeing a broader area, therefore requiring a broader area of experience. And we've got situations where the next level up is an academic management role where there's minimum qualifications that are set by the state, not by us. And so generally they include a master's degree. So there's more training that you're going to have before you can move up to that level. None of these are unovercomable challenges, but they are challenges. And it ties to really looking at where you want to go and what's needed to get there. It may involve going back to school, or may involve taking other types of transfer or working out of class opportunities to gain a broader experience. So we've talked about preparing for upward mobility and submitting a strong application, presenting well in an interview, taking advantage of working out of class assignments. But what's left? What additional boost do you need when you're going into that final interview, when the selection is down to just a few remaining candidates? And how does this relate to this slide? What's meant by this career reputation score thing? So are we saying that if you do a good job in your regular position, you work cooperatively with everybody, always keep a smile on your face, then we can promise you're going to get that promotion? And and real life is just not that predictable. It's messy, it's unpredictable. While there's many aspects you can control, we can't pretend there aren't situations that can be more challenging from one department to another. So when we're talking about career reputation, I want to focus on two challenging scenarios. One of them is the working out of class assignments, how you can maximize your marketability in those. And also another more difficult issue is dealing with challenges within your current job. So working out of class assignments, maybe it's within your own department, maybe it's within a different department, but this is giving you an opportunity to do an expanded role that you're maybe taking on duties you're not as familiar with. It's a learning opportunity. And it's an opportunity, I think, more importantly, to present what you can do to a broader audience. So you want to make sure you take advantage of this as much as possible. The basics: show up on time, submit projects on time, ask questions when you need to, Don't try to figure it all out yourself. You're not going to be expected to know everything as someone who's been doing the job for 10 years. We had a situation, I know at my last job, number of years back, this was back at the start of the recession around 2008, where we had our recruitment work slowed down to a stop, but there were two other departments in the Personnel Commission where they desperately needed temporary help. One of them was a really exciting, fun place to work, lots of exciting projects. The other one was very mind-numbing, tedious, meticulous work that could put you to sleep if you just weren't that type of personality that was really great at that. And so everybody wanted this opportunity. Nobody wanted the boring opportunity. And as life works, some people got this and some people got this. And I remember having two people on my team who took the more boring opportunities, and they went in and they were consistently late for meetings. They would, 2 weeks would go by when they were supposed to submit a project, and they would say, can I have another day? I just couldn't get to it, things going on, whatever. And then time came for the next round of working out of class opportunities, and they weren't selected for anything. And they were coming back to me saying, why? If I was only working in this exciting department, I would have done great. It would have been more fun. But that's just not always the departments that are open. So it kind of stresses the need for taking advantage of opportunities, even if it's not your number one opportunity you'd like, but also putting out your best foot forward with any kind of working out of class opportunity, even if you're struggling to kind of fake that positivity in there. Now, what about your current job situation? I've been really fortunate to have worked for some absolutely incredible leaders in situations where doing a good job, working cooperatively with others, taking advantage of professional development opportunities was made really easy for me. But I've also worked in other situations where it was at the opposite end of the spectrum too. So I know there are challenges in some place. I think, excuse me. So I think the question comes up with, how do you continue to do a good job, maintain a good reputation, and also take care of yourself if you're in a problematic situation? And this is a really tough question with no easy answers. I thought about skipping it, but I know it is a question that comes up a lot, and I wish I had an easy answer. I think the main thing I could recommend is that if you feel you're in a situation that might impact your reputation, number one, try not to act on impulse. And I know that's difficult to do. I've had many emails in my past that I've and then I've got to delete, start over again. Okay, come back in an hour and try it again, because I'm just not in a place where I can be professional right now. And that happens. But I think also trying not to handle the situation alone, I think, is the best advice I can give. I would strongly encourage you to talk to a union rep. There's no commitment to action, but you are talking to someone who's heard many situations in their service to CSEA, and they probably have some really good insight on what you're dealing with. You can also talk with representatives from HR, representatives from the Personnel Commission too. We're more than happy to talk through any kind of problematic situations you have. Some other things I've seen that I want to touch on real quickly. How am I doing on time? I'm going to talk fast. Some things that we've seen that can hurt your chances for upward mobility that you might not be thinking about. One is this mentality of, I'm not going to apply unless the situation looks absolutely perfect for me. And so we've seen situations where people don't want to apply because they don't want to work with that supervisor, or they think that supervisor has someone else in mind. Sometimes they may be right, not always right. But then what happens is 2 months later, another position opens up in the same classification in a wonderful, perfect department, and they've lost that opportunity. So I would always tell you to apply. If you are anything less than one, I would say if you're 99% sure that you maybe don't want this particular job, apply anyway. Push yourself to compete well, push yourself to get on a list. Once you get on a list, you can then turn around and change your mind all you want to do. People do it all the time. They get on a list and then they call back and say, okay, I don't want this department, but if something opens up in one of these departments, please contact me. And that's no big deal. We do that all the time. So I think just beyond that, the only other thing I can say is just persistence. I've seen people many times who apply for things, for promotions over and over again. And on our end, on the back end that we're seeing, we're watching them again and again and again, almost getting that position. They go to a final interview and we watch the hiring manager go, this person, oh my God, okay, this person. And they're just missing it by this much. And it's wonderful when we see those people just keep trying and keep trying and keep trying, and then they finally get that promotion. Sometimes it's not that you are a bad person, you're doing a bad thing. It's just that's the way the cards played that time, but please come back and try again. And I think that's it for our presentation, but we want to see if there's any questions we have or any questions I may have missed. We may have missed anywhere that popped up in the chat.
So far we've addressed everything in the chat, whether it was by you responding or it being answered already.
Okay.
I did want to share one thing, sorry.
Yeah.
That after every recruitment process, you'll receive a notice with your test results, or maybe, what you didn't move forward. Whatever the case is, we always have a 5-day review period. Again, this is not gonna, to change your score, but it's definitely a good way to receive feedback as to what you can do to improve your opportunities to advance for future jobs, or change, maybe let's say for the qualifying appraisal interview, you didn't do so well, but you're invited to the final interview. That would be a good time to call us and say, is there any feedback, and you can implement for your final interview or other interviews. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Olga. I've seen a number of times people come in for reviews when they did well, they made the list, but they just didn't get that top rank, and they want to know how to make themselves more competitive for the final interview. And a lot of times just having that insight on what you may have missed can be really, really helpful.
Awesome. Well, thank you, ladies, very, very much. I think this was an amazing presentation. Go ahead, Carol.
Somebody asked a really important question here that I want to address. They said, I thought there was a rule when you're on a list, you can only reject interviewing for 3 opportunities. Third rejection, you're off the list. Is that true? Yes and no. I mean, you can give us a generally broad, I don't want to work here, but I only want this, or I only want part-time, I only want full-time. But if you do 3 rejections and you're off the list, how do you get back on the list? You just contact us and say, can I get back on the list? And so I think it's much better to risk that than just not apply and not even get on a list, and then you miss out on a good opportunity. So don't worry about the rejection so much. If you do end up getting off the list, just call us and say, put me back on. What do I need to do to get back on? Really good question.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Carolina. If no one else has any other questions. I
have a question.
Oh, sorry.
For those who are seeking to change departments that are not necessarily the same. So for instance, like going from accounting to like student services, where like the experience knowledge is completely different. What would you recommend for those seeking that change?
Well, that's a really good question too. I think the first step would be going back to that sheet. I know Olga was showing you at the beginning, and it's on that handout that we gave you, but it's called job classifications by job discipline. I think it is, but it's where it lists all the different classified jobs in the district and what's available at what range. So you can kind of see, all right, if I want to move into financial area, what is available? There's the accounting specialist at range 30, accounting technician at range 32 or 34 or whatever it is, and so on. And then you can go to our website where we've got the classifications listed and see what's the minimum requirements for this. Is this something where I meet the minimum requirements? And maybe it's something where there's a little piece missing, like an additional accounting class or something like that, that you might be able to pick up pretty quickly at even at Santa Monica College. But see what are you missing? What are you not missing? Look and see if there's something, there's kind of an equivalency in there too, because most of our classifications say, if you don't have this education, if you have more experience, then that covers the education. Or if you don't have the experience, if you have more education, a bachelor's versus an associate's, that would cover it too. So you may be surprised to see that you do meet the minimum requirements for something, even if it's in a different area. And then at that point, I think it would be helpful to look at the possibility of working out of class assignments, even if it's at the same range or a downward range, or even doing, like I know Olga talked about at the beginning of this, when she was in a situation in one department, but she wanted to move into HR, taking a voluntary voluntary demotion to a lower classification with the intention of working up. And it's not losing pay because if you're represented employee, you're what we call Y rated, which means you stay at the same salary rate, you just don't go up. And so it's not a loss of salary, it's just a loss of future gains of salary until you actually start moving up. And I think beyond that, if you know anybody who works in the area, whether they're maybe at a higher level, like an accountant or an accounting supervisor, accounting manager, I would strongly encourage you to talk to them. If you're comfortable talking to the department director or supervisor, that's also good too, but just let them know you've got an interest in this area and you might want to move into it, and what things are you looking for, just to get some more insight.
Okay, thank you. All right, everyone. We're approaching the 2 o'clock mark. So if anybody else has any other questions, please feel free to ask now or place it in the chat, or also the ladies did provide the website for you guys to address any other questions that you may have.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Olga, Carol, and Karen. That I almost, I'm glad I spit that out all in one sitting. It was a little bit of a tongue twister. So thank you, ladies, for taking the time to present for professional development today. I'm sure these tips were extremely helpful for a lot of our classified professionals.
And always feel free to call us if you have questions on anything too. We're at 4410. And so, yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So everyone, if no one else has any questions, the Zoom session will be ending in about 60 seconds. And just a quick reminder that we do have 2 more sessions for the 2 to 3 o'clock hour and the 3 to 4 o'clock hour. Okay. Thank you again, ladies. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you everybody for attending.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, so again, thank you, ladies, and I'll be ending the session now.
Okay, thank you.
Alrighty, thank you. Take care. Have a good one.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.